Today, we will learn how we can manage our permissions within SharePoint on 3 levels so that you can learn to customize them to your own preferences. This video has been requested by my audience on my Microsoft list and SharePoint document library tutorials. Hi, I'm Amy. Let's nerd out. Firstly, we need to take a step back and look at what happens behind the scenes when we create a SharePoint site. Now, it's important to understand that SharePoint and Teams are strongly integrated with each other. And there are 2 ways that we can create a site or a Microsoft team. Firstly, we can create a SharePoint site and then connect that site to Teams and create a team that way. Alternatively, we can create a Microsoft team and then a SharePoint site will automatically be created in the backend. But either way, in both cases, we get a 365 group. And when we create a 365 group, we are defining permissions for that team and site. So permissions are typically organized by departments, projects, or clients. And we are going to add members to the group. So we're going to be thinking about who will you be sharing that content with. And the final piece is access. So what type of access will they have to that content? Now, when we create a 365 group, we automatically get a shared document library. So this is where your team can share and collaborate on files. And additionally, we can also integrate other applications. So we can add new document libraries and we can even add Microsoft lists and other applications. And creating a team or site to share your content is really an effective way to collaborate with your team members because everything that is integrated with that 365 group inherits the permissions of the 365 group. So everyone is going to automatically gain access to that content. However, there may be times where you want to have unique permissions for specific areas of that site, such as a document library or a Microsoft list. And we can do this. And when we do, we need to break the inheritance from the 365 group of the parent site. So, what happens when we break the inheritance? Instead of managing permissions for just the parent site, we are now going to be managing permissions for different areas of that site. So it does create some additional administration. And in some cases, you might even be better off to create a whole new site or Microsoft team. But there may be times where you decide that it will be best to break the inheritance and define those unique permissions. So today, we are going to learn how we can manage the permission levels within a SharePoint site or Microsoft team on 3 different levels so that you can understand how they all work together because you really need to understand the foundation before we can start to make any changes. So the 3 levels are the site, the library or list, and then finally at the file or list item level. So you can see that we're going from bigger to smaller. And a quick overview of what we'll cover today is that for the site permission settings, which is the biggest, broadest settings, we'll look at the privacy settings, the site permissions, site sharing, as well as the different permission levels within that site. Then at the library and list permission level, we will take a look at how we can access those permissions. Then we will see how we can break the inheritance from the parent site, and then how we can customize those permissions to our own preferences. And finally, we will finish off with permission settings at the file and list item level, where we can manage access to specific items. Now that we have looked at the big picture, let's quickly walk through the creation of a SharePoint site to ensure that we are all on the same page, as this is really the baseline for the permissions for your site and team. I recommend creating teams from a SharePoint site. So creating the SharePoint site first and then adding it to the team, because for some reason, the out of the box features are different. And by creating the SharePoint site first, you'll have better visibility to integrations with Microsoft Exchange, which is going to be your Outlook, email, and calendar. But regardless of where you create your team, whether that's from a Microsoft Teams or within SharePoint site, the permission settings are still going to be the same. So that's a little bit of a sidebar there. I do apologize, but let's walk through this team site. All right, so from SharePoint, you can access SharePoint from the app launcher in any of the 365 apps, and we have SharePoint there. And then on the top left, we'll see Create Site. So here we can either choose a team site or a communication site. And the team site is the one that we are looking for. This one will be creating a 365 group, thereby that permissions and all of that good stuff. A team site is also a private space where we can collaborate with our team members. This is very common with projects or departments or other areas within your organization. So let's go with a team site. Then we can select a template. I'm just going to go with a standard template and then use template. So here we are going to give our site a name. So at Amy's Animal Shop, I'm just going to be creating a team for our sales department. And you'll just see this note here on the side that says your team site will be connected to a Microsoft 365 group, which gives your site a shared OneNote notebook, group email address, and Teams calendar. So there is that 365 group, which is at the heart of every SharePoint site and Microsoft team. So we can go and click next. And then here we have our privacy settings. So this is the permissions for that site. So we'll see that this is private, where only members can access the site, but we could also make it public and anyone in the organization can access the site. So private is going to be more restrictive on accessibility. And regardless of what you select here, it can also be changed. And I'll show you how we can do that in a moment. So next you have a language, and then we can just create the site. We'll see that the site is creating, and we now have an opportunity to add owners and members. So owners are going to have full control of the site content, the theme permissions, the hub associations, and other site settings, whereas members can edit and view site content, including files, pages, lists, and navigation. So I'm going to add Mike. When we add Mike, we'll see one member has been added, and then we have an ability to toggle between member and owner. So by default, the person that creates the site is going to be the team owner. And then you can add additional owners to help you with the administration. And then everyone else will be a member. So I'm going to leave Mike as a member, and then we can finish. And we'll see that we are now adding users to our site. So here is our SharePoint site. Now, if we had created a team in Microsoft Teams first, then a SharePoint site would have been opened in the backend. Whereas when we create a SharePoint site first, we have to manually add it into Microsoft Teams to create a team from that site. And to do that, we can go to this little pop-up on the bottom left here and go add Microsoft Teams. We'll see a little blurb here, and we can just go and continue. And then this page is just asking us if we want to pin any resources or tabs to our Microsoft team. I'm just going to select the default here, which is the home page. And now we can go add to teams. So now we can see in the bottom right here, you might not see it, but it says creating your team. All right, so that just takes a moment to pop through. There are some additional next steps here. I'm just going to close that. But on the left-hand side here, beside the SharePoint site name, we now have this little Teams icon. So if we click on that, then we are now going to open this up within Microsoft Teams. And then now we will have our team added as a team within Microsoft Teams. So there is that additional step, but I do recommend doing that process. Now that we have created our site and added it to a team, I wanted to show you some differences in the settings for a owner versus a member. So for myself, I'm on the left here, and if I go up to this gear icon, you're going to see that I have a lot of settings available and ways that I can customize things. Whereas with Mike, if we expand that gear icon, he has a much more limited list. So he doesn't have all of the functionality that I have. And that just demonstrates another one of the differences between members and owners. Now that we've seen those two permission settings side by side, let's take a look at how we can manage the settings at the site level. So once again, we will go up to this gear icon, and then this time we will go to site information. So here we can edit the name of the site and give a description, but we can also change those privacy settings. So when we created this site, we defined private, but we could also make this public, meaning anybody in the organization can access the content. So that is not fixed when you create the site. You do have that flexibility to change it here, but I'm going to leave this as is for now, and we can close out of the site information. The next piece at the site level is taking a look at these site permissions. So at the top here, we can add members. So this is similar to adding team members to a Microsoft team. And then we have these default permission levels that are created when the site is created. So we'll see that we have owners and we have members and then we have visitors. So if we expand the owners, then we'll see that they have full control. And if we hover over that little information icon, then we can see what that entails. We can see that owners have full control of the site, the theme, permission settings, site settings, and hub associations. Whereas with members, we can see that they have limited control. So they can edit and view site content. So they don't have all of the access to managing permission settings and that kind of stuff, right? And we'll see here that the members, they have the ability to edit the content. So that is their defined permission setting. Now you can change this here to read or full control. I would not recommend changing that right away. It is a little bit difficult to change it once you change it right away. So you're going to want to walk through all of the other settings and take a look at how you actually want to structure the permissions within your organization. Now, the last piece here is the site visitors. So visitors are going to be people that are not part of that 365 group, and they have access to some of the content on your SharePoint site or Microsoft team. And we'll see here that by default, they don't have control, which means that they can only view the content. So these are the baseline or the default permissions that are created when we create a SharePoint site. The next thing that I want to show you is the site sharing. So here we can change how members share content within our site. So we can see at the top here that we have sharing permissions, and we have the least restrictive to the most restrictive. So at the top here, we have site owners and members can share files, folders, and the site. And then people with edit permissions can share files and folders. Now, I want to draw your attention to edit permissions. So people with edit permissions can share files or folders. So keep the edit permissions in mind to when we get to the more advanced settings within the site level. So at the bottom here, on the contrary, we have only site owners can share files and folders on the SharePoint site. So that is going to be the most restrictive sharing settings. And also just note that the sharing permissions, these are at the site level, and these cannot be customized when we break the inheritance. That's just something to keep in mind as well. So now down below, we have access requests. So if you are restricting the sharing of content within your SharePoint site, then if somebody wants to share something with somebody that doesn't already have access to that content, then you can allow them to submit an access request. Then somebody can approve access to that file. So that's what these access requests are. So you could toggle it on, or if you don't even want to have that option available, you can remove that as well. So that is the site sharing settings. Now, the next thing on this permissions area is guest expiration. So here you can define when guest access to content is going to expire. This can be a good idea rather than keeping it open-ended. So that is the guest expiration, and that wraps up the basic permissions at the site level. So let's now move on to some advanced permission settings, and we are still on that site level. So here we are within those site permissions, and we can see those predefined groups as well as their corresponding permission levels that we just went over. If you want to view these permission levels, then we can just go up to permission levels on the ribbon there, and then we can select a level that we would like to view. So these are all of the options that we have for managing the permissions within that permission level. And just note here that this is divided into list permissions, but it's actually list or file permissions. So, for example, add items. So, team members are going to be able to add items to lists and add documents to document libraries. So, this is lists and documents. Then we also have a site permissions. So this is going to be on the broader scale of site content within your SharePoint site. And then at the bottom here, we just have some personal permissions. So you can toggle these off or toggle them on and adjust these levels as you see fit. And then just be sure that you submit any changes. In addition to these predefined levels, you can also add a permission level. And just note that we are not able to select any of these and delete them. These are pre-built and they generally encompass everything that you should need, but you do have that ability to add those unique levels. And if you did add a unique level, then you would be able to select it and then delete that permission there. So let's now go back to the main area here. Now, if you want to add permissions, then we can go up to this grant permissions on the top left. And then here we can invite people or groups. So for example, I'm going to add Mike. And if we go show options, then we can decide which level of permission I want to give Mike. Now, remember that Mike is part of the sales members here. So when we assign people to multiple permission levels, the highest permission level will win. So Mike already has the edit permissions, but if we select this dropdown, I also want him to be able to help with the design of the SharePoint site. So he's now going to also have that functionality, even though the sales members edit permission level doesn't include the design components. This one will win and supersede that. So now we can share that with Mike. And then now Mike is going to be added to our permissions here. Sometimes you just need to refresh your screen and then you will see any of your changes appear. So you can see that Mike has been added and he has that design level of permission. Now, the other way that we can grant permissions is we can grant a group of people within our organization. So for example, we have our marketing team. So I can start to type the team name. We'll see marketing members. So all of the members that are within the marketing team, I can now bulk grant them permissions. So if we go to show options, then I'm just going to select the drop down here. And this time I'm going to allocate them as a visitor to this team. So they are going to have the read only permissions. So now we can go and share that as well. Now for Mike, if we decide that we want to change those permissions, we can select it here and you'll see that we can now edit or remove the user permissions. We'll just go and remove those permissions. And then now Mike has been removed, that design permission level. Now, as for the other items, these ones here, if we select these are still grayed out. And that's because we are not able to edit those default ones here. Otherwise, you run into issues with the team or the SharePoint site not functioning appropriately. Now, if we want to manage those marketing team members that we just added, we will need to select into the sales visitors area and we will see the marketing members there. So if we wanted to remove them, then we can select it, go actions, and then go remove users from group. We'll just go okay. And then now they have been removed that read only access. So that is how we can manage permissions at the site level. Now, the second area that we are going to look at for managing permissions is at the Microsoft list or SharePoint document library level, where we can create unique permissions by breaking that inheritance and defining new permissions. So let's pop into SharePoint. And I've just switched over to the marketing team here because I do have a list and a document library that I can demonstrate on. So we will go to the site contents, and here we can see the contents that we have within this SharePoint site. So we have a content scheduler, which is a list. So I can open this up and I'll show you how to manage the permissions there. But we also have a pet Halloween costume document library. So we can manage the permissions for that one as well. Now, to get to the permission settings for these two items is slightly different. So I'm going to walk through the process for both. So to go to the list, we'll just open it up. You can also access your list from Microsoft List. That works as well. But here we are, we have our list open and we can go up to this gear icon. Then we will go to list settings. Then from here, we go to permissions for this list. So that is how we can access the permissions for the list. Let's now take a look at how we can access them for the document library. So we will open up our document library and then similarly, we'll go up to that gear icon and we'll go library settings. And then there's just one extra step here, which is more library settings. Then we'll go to permissions for this document library. And then here we are within the document library permission settings. So now we can break the permissions and define unique permissions for a list or a document library. I have switched over to the list, but you will have a similar experience within the permission settings for a document library. Now, at the top here, you are going to have a yellow message. It might be the same as mine or it might be different. This one, the library inherits permissions from its parent. That means that these permissions have not been broken and they are still inherited from the parent site. However, if you see something different, Microsoft has broken them down on this page here, then you can review this section here and walk through any other unique message that you have. I will include a link to this document in the description of your video so that you can check it out later. So now we are ready to break the inheritance. And to do that, we can go to stop inheriting permissions. You are going to get this warning and we can go and push on through. So you'll notice now that that yellow message has changed. We have this library has unique permissions. So that means that it is no longer connected to the parent site. So now we can define our unique permissions. Now, similarly, we have this grant permissions at the top. But one difference here is that we are now able to select these items and now we can edit or remove a user's permissions. So for example, for our members, if we want to edit their permissions, then we can make it so that members cannot edit, but they can contribute to a Microsoft list. And then we can go and click OK. So that is how we can now edit the permission levels directly for this Microsoft list. And these permissions are going to be unique from the parent site. However, if you decide that you want to restore those permissions, then we can just go up to this delete unique permissions on the top left. We are about to inherit permissions from the parent site. Any custom permissions will be lost and we can just click OK and push on through. So that is how we can customize the permissions for a SharePoint document library or a Microsoft list at the library and list level. The third area that I wanted to show you was how we can manage permissions at the file or folder level. So let's say, for example, here in our marketing team, we have some bingo sheets for our dog summer bash party, and I want to limit the access to that document. So we'll hover over the file, we can select the ellipses and then go manage access. And you'll see here that we have people. So this file is not being shared with anyone yet. But if you do see some people here, then you might want to edit that and adjust it depending on what you see. But the area that I want to manage is going to be within this groups. So here we have those groups that we are familiar with. We have the owners, the visitors, and the members. And then if we select visitors, for example, we can select this drop down here and we can say no direct access. But alternatively, you can just make it view only so they can't make changes, or they can view but they can't download the file. But no direct access will remove that file from your site visitors altogether. And then now we can go and apply and we will remove that access. Now, as a tip for managing files, if you have a group of files that you want to restrict access to, then what I would recommend doing is Creating a new folder, I always recommend giving it a color so that your team members know that you've created that folder. It's not a default one that goes yellow that's been created by Microsoft. And then we can take those files and we can drag and drop them into that folder. And then now we can manage access to that folder. So we can select the ellipses, go manage access. And then within the groups, we can once again select and then remove that access. Now, these areas that we have looked at today can all be done on the front end within your SharePoint site. But if you are dealing with really sensitive information, then you may want to work with your IT manager to implement some sensitivity labels or data loss prevention policies or something else to ensure that your data is protected. The other thing that I wanted to recommend is that for a list, if you are concerned about people editing and making changes, and you want to keep a close eye on changes to your list, what you can do is we can go up to automate, go rules, and then create a rule. So when an item is modified, you could even do when an item is deleted. We'll go when an item is modified, you can define a column, you can choose a condition, and then you can say send an email to me, and then that way, every time that an item is modified, you are going to receive an email notification, but you could also define somebody else here as well. And for more advanced tips on automating your Microsoft list, then you can check out this video here.